Hey everybody, happy Monday, happy beginning of the week. Thank you for tuning in to Agents Who Win with Daniel and Todd. Hoping to coach you guys on a path to success. Daniel, let's take it on. We are on week 9 of our Track Plus coaching, 12-week coaching program, and it's how to run your business like a business. Be the CEO.
Week 9 out of 12. And exactly, be the CEO of your business. We have to run our business not like a business and not just bump and scrape along. If you don't track your activities and track the production of those activities, you're just kind of treating your business all based on emotion, which is never a good thing. So it was all about, this week 9 was all about knowing your numbers. We would also describe that as inspect what you expect.
Yep.
So for a lot of agents out there, you might feel like the business just isn't coming in, but if you can look at some data to determine why that is, that would help you a lot. So it's really important to have some kind of a numbers tracker. A lot of coaching systems come with some kind of a numbers tracker. I mean, it's as easy as doing it on Excel. You want to track the conversations that you have. So, contacts, you might say 200 contacts, if you do 10 contacts a day, times 5 days a week, that is 50 contacts a week times 4 weeks a month, 200 contacts. A contact is not just making a phone call. A contact is a conversation that you have with a new person where real estate is discussed at some point in the conversation.
Yeah.
So for the sake of this conversation, that's what a contact is. You can also call it a conversation. It's also not your 10th conversation with the same customer. So it has to be
It's not transaction follow-up or anything like that. It's
right.
New people.
Exactly. It's not like, hey, your appraisal is going to happen today and, mark that down. It's a conversation that could yield, a transaction or a different, new transaction. So it should be a new contact with a new person where two-way conversation, not a voicemail where I said, hey, let me tell you about the real estate market. Two-way conversation, so you can't count any conversations with yourself either. So you definitely, track those. So if you do 200 contacts on a monthly basis, you will be able to determine, if you're tracking this over time, how many closings did that effort yield? So, for example, if 200 contacts, I wrote down an example here. So if 200 contacts was getting you 10 appointments, for example, that's a 20-to-1 ratio. So if you do 20 appointments, if 20 appointments yield 10 closings, that's a 40-to-1 ratio. It took you 40 contacts to get to one closing, and it took you 20 contacts to get to one appointment. So, you'll also want to track your buyer appointments versus seller appointments. But in this example, if it's taking you 40 conversations with new people to generate one closing, in this example, if that closing is worth $6,000, let's say in commission, that means if you divide that $6,000 by the 40 conversations that you had, each of those conversations was worth $150 a piece. So
you're going to pay me $150 a phone call, which will result in a check. I mean, that's not bad.
Right, exactly. So you just want to think of all of those conversations, even though you might not see the money right away. If you just stay consistent, which has been a message throughout this whole coaching program, consistency is what takes you to the next level. If you're consistent with this, it's going to yield the closings. And what's even better is as you gain experience, your ratios and your efficiency become better. So it will take fewer conversations to get to closings. It'll take fewer appointments to get to a closing. So if you do 200 contacts on a monthly basis, and that yields a closing per 40 contacts, that's 5 closings in a month. 5 closings times $6,000, that's $30,000 in a month. 30 times 12 is what? $360,000. Yes. So
200 conversations a month can create $360,000 in income. That's not bad money.
In the beginning, it might take you 400 contacts to get to that point. But as you improve, you're going to become more efficient. Or maybe you're just super skilled on the phone, or maybe the people who you're calling are more motivated to do real estate transactions. But the whole point is you won't know until you start tracking those numbers. So it's super, super important.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, on that topic, let's just say if this activity yielded $360,000 of commission dollars, you might have a goal of profiting X amount, or you might have a goal of paying off X amount of debt, or you might have a goal of buying an investment property or putting your kids through university. You all of these things have numbers, and numbers, and the math don't lie. So once you have these monetary goals, you can break it down exactly to what do I have to do in order to accomplish these financial goals of mine.
No, I think it's great when you sit there and balance out, because you're going to break down, if you want to see what your total profit's going to be, and you should be around 30% at the end of the year, in, take home. And, what was your systems to get to those 200 conversations? Was it listings that were creating sign calls that were creating other opportunities? Was it paying for software? Was it paying for coaching? Was it, what were you paying for? This whole chapter was all about knowing the numbers. But it's like, once you know the numbers, you can really dissect down and see what it's costing you, like, to take that listing to, and how many listings you need to take. It's one of the things too I like about guys that do FSBOs and expireds, because that's all tracked. It's all done in the system. They're doing all outbound, and they know it takes me 100 calls to get 10 contacts to usually get around one appointment per, per 100, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
And, even like the internet business that we're doing, I'm seeing a 2 to 3% ratio with the, if we bring in 500 leads, we're going to probably close 15 of them, or convert 15 and hopefully get those to closing.
Right.
So it's a numbers game, and you got to see where you're at, and and where you're going to chase your business from.
It's easier to track when you're getting leads from some source where you can look back, on a monthly basis or yearly basis and say, okay, this source, because they send it through email or they send it through my CRM, this source sent me 100 leads and I was able to close, 8 of those leads. It's easy to track when you're using technology to take those leads getting inputted into your system. But on the phone calls that you're making, you have to put in some effort and track those phone calls. The cool thing over the last week, also separately from this coaching, I was having several conversations about the DISC profile and, personality types. So I was just thinking about this, and just like what you were saying, not everybody is cut out necessarily to make FSBO and expired calls. Some people would argue that and just say you just got to get comfortable no matter what personality type you are. But the whole point is to have conversations. You don't have to have a certain personality type. Like, maybe if you want to do it through FSBOs or circle prospecting, a certain personality type is ideal for that kind of prospecting. But you could also have conversations in other ways. If you're an I and you may not, pick up the phone to call a bunch of strangers, you can start calling your sphere of influence and just try to make connections with their spheres of influence. So there is definitely a recipe for every personality type out there to be successful in real estate. If you don't know what that is for yourself, you might consider just talking to a coach, talking to someone who has a lot more experience, and get their input on it.
Well, I love the DISC profile side, because and I was just looking real quick to see if we can find the sheet on it. But in our book, it shows best lead generation by DISC profile. Yeah. And I'm not one to call FSBOs and expireds yet. I'm a high D, and that's one of the top things that's on there. And that's just something that I don't do. I'm going to find where I can bring the business inbound versus going outbound. Right. But it's funny because you look at your D and I have very similar lead generation styles, where the I and S will have similar lead generation styles, and the S and C will have similar lead generation styles. So they kind of overflow, but it's, that's just not my method. And I probably should have started that 20 years ago, because it would have been more comfortable. And that's why I drill people in the beginning, pick up the phones, make it a habit. Because if you can start creating good habits now, 20 years later, you're not going to be complaining about the bad habits you've created.
Right, exactly. And, even the Michael Mayer event, for example, that you hosted, that's all about your communicating with massive amounts of people, in one conversation, like a one-to-many or one-to-one. So there are different ways to create conversations. And that's what I mean. As you become experienced, you start molding your style, for your personality type, and then you start figuring out what works for you, and you become more efficient at it.
Yeah. No, exactly. And you find your rhythm and you find your flow. And that's where, like, I know I need to bring in so many leads into the company, so I know we can convert so much. If we
Right.
can convert and close that, cool. We're going to be running it at a high level profit. If we can't convert, it's either the lead source or it's the systems we're using to convert that lead source.
Right. So, all of this, there's levels to knowing your numbers. Like you were talking about before we hopped on this call, if you're a broker owner, team leader, there's other numbers that you should also be tracking. Maybe all of your efforts are not necessarily on closing transactions for yourself, but you're a team leader, I'm a team leader. We're also tracking other numbers to see what the production is of the team, what the ROI is on various lead sources. And we also have to factor in other, just business expenses. If we have a goal of netting or profiting X amount, in order to know how to reach that goal, we also have to have finely tuned what our expenses are.
Yeah. And that's the thing is, like, I'm working on my numbers for next year and balancing out how many deals we want to do based on the splits that we have. And so now I know exactly what we're going to bring in. Now I need to, off the money we should be bringing in, balance out what my expenses are. And if everything goes as it should, we will turn about a 30 to 35% profit next year, even with a salary in plus some of my, my own production. So it's good when you sit there and start backing things out, because that's what we're doing with our team this week is we're sitting down one-to-one with each one of them. What do you want to make? What are your lead sources you've converted in the past? And how can we help excel those lead sources further? Because if you don't close YLOPO, for example, why are we going to keep you on that? We need to find a different system for you to find business.
Right.
And then we can double down on you on that lead source.
Yes, everybody should be tracking the sources of their closings. So if you have a closing, you should be tracking in your CRM. Everybody should be operating off of a CRM. Every CRM will allow you to track the source of every closing. And, a CRM, like we've kind of beat that dead horse to a pulp, is everyone should be working with a CRM and everyone should be tracking all of their conversations. Because if you're having conversations on a high level and you just forget to follow up because you're not tracking them, you're just it's money down the toilet.
No, exactly. And it's when you sit there and look at, like, either team members are not converting or even making the calls, like you're like our Zello stuff we have going on. Every phone call that is not converted is $600 down the drain that somebody spent. And every internet lead, like a Google LSA, for example, every time the phone rings, it's $70. And so it's like, how many of those conversions do you need to, obviously you're not going to convert every one of them, but you got to balance it out and say that lead source cost me X, I made Y. So now I know that lead source works. Do you want a 3-to-1, 4-to-1, 5-to-1 return on your expense there?
And you're looking at it at, that first level. Like this Zillow call costs $600 to generate. So if you don't pick it up, it's $600 that I've lost. But, on the optimistic side, or depending on how the lead's being treated, every person every transaction that we have, every customer that has a good experience, a lot of times yields 7 to 9 transactions over the lifetime of your real estate career. Yep. So that $600 call could, really cost you $100,000 by that. So it's super important. That's the main takeaway of week 9 is to know your numbers, track your numbers, and set some goals, and then backtrack from the goals on what it takes to reach those goals.
Yeah, if you figure out, if I want to make $100,000 next year, like how many people do I need to talk to every day? And where am I going to find those sources from? And don't say 10 different sources, because it's $100,000 could be 12 deals. So you're going to pull 12 different sources. No, you could highly focus on 3 to 4 different sources, whether it's buying a zip code in Zillow and getting some referral companies and, some other places, but narrow it down your stuff, because if you are trying to figure out 12 deals from 12 different sources, it's never going to work.
And you can figure out your return on investment. If you're getting 10 closings a year from open houses, that probably costs you less than if you're getting 10 deals a year from a lead source like Zillow or something else. So, focus on return on investment as well, or at least be aware of it and factor that into your equations and track your sources, track your numbers.
Right. No, it's a big thing, and track where your stuff's coming from. Well, guys, hope this brought you some value today. Again, know your numbers, know your income, and know your expenses, and you'll have a profitable, successful real estate career. Only took us 9 weeks to figure that out, or 20 years. But hope you guys have an awesome week, and we will be back to you Friday with some on my show on Friday with some Facebook lead generation tactics that are free to use, creating conversations. So again, conversations create closing. So let's jump on Friday at 12. We're pivoting our time a little bit for our guest, and look forward to seeing you guys then. Daniel, appreciate your time today.
Also wanted to share the business planning sessions that are coming up. We're covering all of this information that we've covered over the last 9 weeks, and essentially, it's going to help agents leave the session with a template of what they have to do for 2022, and that starts right away. In October, you're already working on your 2022 business.
Yeah, and I'll be putting some content out here a little bit on our times, but October, November, we're hosting in-person sessions in Orlando. If you guys are in the Orlando market and want to come, please reach out to us. I'll be at our office in Altamont Springs. We will look at doing some online stuff. We just haven't figured out when and where would be online, but when and date and time yet. So, cool. Look forward to it.
Thanks, Todd.
Thanks, Daniel.